So we've made it to part 2 of Al Capone Does My Shirts. Last we read Moose got in some pretty serious trouble with his dad. Chapter 21 is called It Never Rains on Monday, Thursday, March 28th, 1935. The entire month of February and half of March it rains. Drizzling rain, driving rain, lightning storms and thunder. Big fat sloppy drops, little misty ones and the kind that sting when they come down. It rains every darn stupid day except baseball day. Monday after Monday dawns bright and clear, like some kind of baseball spell. Every Monday I see Scout and them warming up on my way to the boat. I walk by without even looking. On Alcatraz there's nothing to do, no one to do it with, and nothing to look forward to either. I haven't even been thinking about Pete all that much. He isn't much of a letter writer, and it doesn't look like I'm going home anytime soon. Hard to keep up a friendship if you never hear from a person. Annie goes to church with her mom every day. I didn't know it was possible to go to church that much. Piper's off the island, living with her grandma on Nob Hill. Annie says that's because she got in trouble too, but Piper says it's because she's sick to death of us. Mostly I'm glad she's gone. It makes everything easier. I don't even see her much at school now. She's got her own friends, and slowly, day by day, I have mine. Besides, who wants to talk to Piper? Every time I see her, she tells me how much fun she's having living in San Francisco. How irritating is that? My dad gave me back my gloves and my baseball in the middle of February. But with no one to play with, it hasn't done me a whit of good. I tried one day to get some guys to play with me at lunch, but without Scout, they wouldn't. Jimmy was the only one of us who didn't get in trouble. His mom was so busy with the new baby, I guess she forgot. Or maybe she knew him well enough to know it wasn't his idea. I still feel awful about the stuff with my dad. I can't stand that he thinks I let him down. But every time I try to talk to him about it, he says, "Water under the bridge, Moose. Let's move on." The only thing that saved me from going completely nuts is bowling. I never thought I'd care about bowling. You roll a bowl and knock things over. What kind of sport is that? But apparently I'm desperate because whenever Teresa's mom doesn't need her help with baby Rocky, we take Natalie down to the bowling alley in the officers club. It's embarrassing to spend all your time with a 7-year-old girl, but Jimmy is always fiddling with his mechanical devices, so what am I supposed to do? And then there's Natalie. She hasn't had a fit since the day we got in trouble with the warden more than 2 months ago. Not one. And though I let her have her buttons or her rocks or at the officers club her toothpicks, she seems easier and more present. I've met Mrs. Kelly now a couple of times. She's a short, round ball of a woman with a sturdy build and hair the color of plumbing pipes. I didn't like the way she looked at me as if she was trying to find something wrong. In fact, I overheard her telling my mom that sometimes there's more than one kid affected in the same family. "There's nothing wrong with me, you old coot," I felt like screaming in her ear. I didn't, of course. I'm always polite. But even my mother was upset at this comment. "Don't let Moose fool you," she said. "He's smarter than he looks." What is it with me that even my own mother thinks I look stupid? Another funny thing is how used to living on the island with a bunch of criminals I am. It would seem strange to live with regular people after this. Even when I saw the convicts unload the laundry from the boats, it was boring. Nothing to say about it, really. I got tired of watching after a minute or two. And then finally in late March, the weather broke. It got sunny and warm, and there were wildflowers poking up through every crack in the cement. That's when Piper came back to Alcatraz to live, and Annie's mom returned to their twice-a-week church schedule. "Here comes trouble," my dad said when Piper came back. He's right, too. It's like the last 2 months haven't happened for her. Her head is full of just as many schemes as it was before. On the way home from school today, she called a meeting on the parade grounds. When Nat and I got there, I could already tell Piper was up to something. "What is it?" I demand. "I'm not telling until everybody's here." "Nobody's going to do what you say anymore, you know. Nobody wants to get in trouble," I say. "Nobody's going to get in trouble." "That's what you said last time." "This isn't against the rules." "You said that last time, too." "Why is it I'm responsible for everything?" she asks as she waves to Teresa, Jimmy, and Annie to hurry up. I roll my eyes. "Sunday," she announces, when we're settled in our private spot at the top of the west stairs. "We've all got to be on the 39 boat to the city and return on the 10. "A round trip?" "Why?" I ask. "Al Capone's mama is coming to Alcatraz. She's scheduled for the 10 a.m. run from Fort Mason." Piper shakes her head and sighs. "How did you survive here without me?" "How do you know about this?" I ask. "I have my ways," Piper says. She stuffs a stick of gum in her mouth, then shoves the pack back in her pocket without offering a piece to any of us. "Which are?" I ask. I read Al's mail. I get to read everything, even the stuff he doesn't get to see. He gets a lot of letters from people asking for money that my mom mails back. Cons are only supposed to get letters from relatives. How come your mom gets to do it? My dad trusts her. Doesn't want Capone's business all over the street? I say. Piper nods. This morning I read a letter from May Capone, that's Al's wife. She looks at me as if I'm the only one who wouldn't know that. She said Al's mama is scheduled to be on the boat March 31, 10 a.m. run. Piper has a big, smug smile on her face. She's waiting for us to tell her how clever she is. Smart, Jimmy says. Piper takes a bow. 31st, 10 a.m., 31st, 10 a.m., Natalie says. But won't we get in trouble for this? She shrugs. We're allowed to take the boat whenever we want. What would we get in trouble for? I try to figure out how this could get us into trouble. I can't come up with anything. Nothing at all. I'm bringing Rocky, Teresa announces. This is going to be history. He has to be there. What's past is always history, stupid, Jimmy says. And you're not bringing Rocky. Mom will never let you. Where I go, he goes, Teresa announces. He's not here now, is he, Jimmy asks. Hold it, Piper commands, her palm raised high. Jimmy's right. Don't bring the baby. Annie, can you get out of church? Annie shakes her head. I doubt it, she says. Piper looks down. She rolls her tongue around in her mouth. Could if you wanted to. Annie's nostrils flare out. She says nothing. Moose, are you going to bring, Piper dips her head towards Natalie, who's sitting quietly dragging her fingers along a patch of moss. No offense or anything, Piper flashes her fake smile, but I don't think you should. You know what? That's none of your business, I shoot back. I decide about Natalie, not Piper. Chapter 22, Al Capone's Mama, Sunday, March 31st, 1935. When the 9:30 boat pulls up, Piper is dressed for charm school. White gloves, white hat, pink sweater, pink hair ribbon. Where's Teresa? I ask Jimmy as we clomp on board. Not coming, Jimmy says. Teresa must have decided that if Rocky can't come, she's not going either. She's pretty possessive about him. It's almost as if she gave birth to the baby herself. On the boat, we head straight to the front, where none of us usually stand. I want to be the first one to see Al Capone's mom waiting at the dock at Fort Mason. When the boat starts moving, we lean against the rail, straining to see the city in the hazy morning. It's a while before we see much of anything, but finally we get out the dock, and then little specks of color that seem like they are people. One of those dots is the mother of public enemy number 1, I think, when I hear a faint wailing behind me. What's that? I ask Piper as the crying gets louder. And then, out of the cabin comes Teresa carrying a howling baby wrapped in a blue crocheted blanket. Rocky's whole face is red like butcher meat. He cries so loud enough to make dogs go deaf. Jimmy, what's Rocky doing here? Piper barks. Jimmy, help me, Teresa cries. How did you get on? Jimmy asks. Mom is going to kill you. Who says she has to know? Teresa whines. Now calm him down. She shoves the screaming infant in his arms, which only makes Rocky cry even louder, though I wouldn't have thought this was possible. Mom walks him, Teresa orders. Jimmy tries walking Rocky up and... That's like a tongue twister. Jimmy tries walking Rocky up and down the rocking boat. He's a big baby, and Jimmy doesn't seem to have a good grip. Don't drop him, Jimmy, Teresa scrambles after him, trying to tuck his chubby little legs back into the blanket. My gran once told me that babies love the gentle sway of cars and boats, but not Rocky. When the boat pulls up to the dock, that baby is crying so loudly, Mrs. Madiman can probably hear him on Alcatraz. In the small group of people waiting at the dock at Fort Mason, there's only one woman who could be Teresina Capone. She's the old Italian woman with a big ruddy face and white, gray, wavy hair. Mrs. Capone has a thick build, round shoulders, and dark, old-fashioned lace-up clothing that looks hot and uncomfortable. I thought she'd be blonde, wearing expensive furs, or flashy like her son in a canary-yellow cape. She looks like anyone's grandma. As soon as Mrs. Capone comes on board, Piper claims the bench next to her, and I sit behind them. Hello, Piper holds her hand out to Mrs. Capone. My name is Piper Williams. Pleased to meet you. Mrs. Capone ignores her. She reads a letter which she holds so close to her face, it seems like it could make her cross-eyed. I don't know if this is because she can't see well or because she's trying to keep its contents from prying eyes, but whatever the reason, it's an effective block. Excuse me, Piper tries again. Excuse me, she drops her small pink purse on Mrs. Capone's toe. Oh, forgive me, she cries. Mrs. Capone looks down at her toe, then up at Piper in surprise. I hope Piper didn't have anything heavy in there. It doesn't seem like a good idea to break the poor old lady's toe. Mrs. Capone picks up the handbag and gives it back to Piper. Oh, thank you. I'm so sorry. Terribly clumsy of me, Piper says. As long as I have your attention, I was wondering. But it's too late. Mrs. Capone has her nose back in her letter. Behind me, I hear Rocky wind up another howl. Mrs. Capone hears him, too. Her head turns to the sound. When she sees Rocky, her whole face seems to light up, like somebody flicked a switch in her head. Mrs. Capone, Piper says, apparently forgetting she isn't supposed to know her name, let me introduce you to Baby Rocky. Mrs. Capone ignores Piper. She's already on her way to Teresa, who's struggling with the howling infant, while Jimmy hops on one foot, singing Farmer in the Dell. Mrs. Capone is standing right next to Teresa now. Oh, BBB, she coos to Rocky. Then she taps Teresa lightly on the sleeve. Me, she offers. Teresa has been so busy with Rocky, she hasn't figured out this is Al's mom. She happily hands Rocky over to Mrs. Capone. Jimmy hesitates. He seems unable to decide what to do. Mrs. Capone takes Rocky in her arms and rocks him gently and wide like a large cradle. Almost immediately, as if by some spell, Rocky stops crying. Mrs. Capone keeps rocking, her smile broad and sweet. Mrs. Capone, Piper won't give up, but Mrs. Capone is ignoring Piper and everyone else. She's busy singing a soft, sweet lullaby in what I'm guessing is Italian. As far as she's concerned, no one else on the boat but that black, curly-haired baby exists. She sings him all the way to Alcatraz. When the boat docks, baby Rocky is asleep. Mrs. Capone sighs. She hands the peacefully sleeping infant back to Teresa Madiman. Then the light in her face goes dark as she gathers herself together and walks slowly forward. Officer Johnson meets her and speaks with her for a moment. Though Mrs. Capone's blank look makes me wonder if she understands English at all. Then he leads her through the metal detector's snitch box, which blares its alarm bell. Oh, Teresa cries. For crying out loud, Jimmy whistles. The old lady's got a piece. She's gonna break him out, Piper cries, her mouth hanging open in complete surprise. Oh my God, Rocky, are you all right? Teresa holds him close. What were you thinking giving him to her? Jimmy hollers at Teresa. Mrs. Capone says something. I can't understand the Italian words, but it seems like she's begging him not to do something. Officer Johnson's billy club is out. He points for her to follow. Officer Johnson and now Officer Trixel escort her to a small storage room under the dock. Other guards press close, and Officer Bomini, up in the tower, trains his Thompson on Mrs. Capone. A minute later, Officer Johnson comes out. Jimmy, your mom speaks Italian. Run, get her fast. When Teresa hears this, she scoots up the hill with Rocky. She's just out of sight when Mrs. Madiman comes down the stairs wearing shoes but no stockings, a hat but no sweater. She runs halfway down the stairs to the dock and disappears inside the storeroom. We wait, hanging around as close as the three guards will let us. When Officer Johnson and Mrs. Capone finally come out, she's all messy looking, like she's dressed in a hurry. Her eyes are cast down. Mrs. Madiman speaks Italian to her. Her voice is kind. Mrs. Capone shakes her head. She won't look up. Instead of getting into the waiting truck to go up the hill to the cell house, Mrs. Capone gets back on the boat. Later we learn that Mrs. Capone had been strip searched to find her weapons. There were none. The metal stays on her old-fashioned corset set. The metal stays. Okay, so like there's like boning on her corset. It set the snitch box off, and try as she might, Mrs. Madiman could not convince the terrified Mrs. Capone that this humiliation was the last. I can't get over this. I keep thinking about when Al Capone was a baby. I'll bet his mama sang him the same song she sang to Rocky. I'll bet she held his hand when they crossed the street, packed his lunch for school, and sewed his name in his jacket. A. Capone, so everyone would know it was his. I'll bet she wishes she would do it all over again, too. If only Al were little and she could. I feel a little sorry for Mama Capone. Well, that does our reading for today. Chapter 23 is where we pick up next time. Seesaw responses. Thanks, 5th grade.